Hi, and welcome to the Dream Season podcast, an oral history of the 1989-90 UConn men's basketball season, also known as the Dream Season. This is episode 7, The Steel Curtain Arrives. The Huskies sported a record of 4-1 heading into their next game on Monday, December 4th. UConn would be facing the University of Maryland in the inaugural ACC-Big East Challenge. The creation of the challenge came about in the summer of 1988 in an effort to add some sizzle to the early part of the college basketball season, as well as settle some schoolyard arguments over which conference was superior. Using the preseason rankings of each conference, the highest-ranked ACC team would face the highest-ranked Big East team, all the way down to the 8th-place school. The 9th-ranked Big East school would sit out the event. 2 games would be held on 4 consecutive nights at quote-unquote neutral sites, such as the Greensboro Coliseum, the Brendan Byrne Arena, and the Hartford Civic Center. Each nightly doubleheader would also be televised on ESPN. There was much anticipation surrounding the challenge during the first year. UConn and Maryland were the 8th-ranked teams, but there were some marquee matchups near the top of the seedings. The number 2 seeds were Syracuse, who was the number 1 nationally ranked team, facing off against number 6 Duke, and the top-seeded matchup pitted number 3 Georgetown against number 17 North Carolina. UConn guard John Gwynn, a native of Hillcrest Heights, Maryland, grew up in ACC country. Said Gwynn, quote, "All I ever hear about is the ACC. That's all people talk about down there. It's a rivalry, and personally, I think our conference is better. I went to Maryland this summer to shoot around with a couple of guys I know on their team, Gerard Mustaf, Tony Massenberg, and Walt Williams. They were talking a lot of trash about how good the ACC is," end quote. Mustaf and Massenberg, both forwards, pace the Terrapins in scoring and comprise the strength of the team. Williams starts at guard, but at 6'8", supplements the front line for Maryland. The Terps were led by first-year coach Gary Williams, who was no stranger to the Huskies and Jim Calhoun. Williams was the head coach at Boston College from 1982 through 1987 and was Ohio State's head man when the Huskies defeated the Buckeyes to win the 1988 NIT championship. Maryland's point guard Tion McCoy was the only true ball handler for Williams' squad, which also lacked depth. Coach Calhoun's plan was to utilize the full-court 2-2-1 press to negate Maryland's size advantage, as well as put pressure on McCoy and make him work to bring the ball over half-court. After Georgia Tech beat Pittsburgh in the opener in a thriller, thanks to Dennis Scott's 42 points, including the game-winning shot at the buzzer, UConn, as the road team, were wearing their national flag blue road uniforms on the Civic Center court. Here's public address announcer Roger Baker with the Huskies starting lineup.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second half of tonight's ACC-Big East Challenge and tonight's matchup between the Maryland Terrapins of the ACC and the University of Connecticut Huskies from the Big East Conference. Now let's meet the starting lineups. For Connecticut, a 6'9" forward from Florence, South Carolina, number 22, Rod Sellers. A 6'5" forward from Hamden, Connecticut, number 24, Scott Burrell. A 7'1" center from Williamsville, New York, number 55, Dan Cerulig. A 6'2" guard from Bridgeport, Connecticut, number 13, Chris Smith. A 6'5" guard from Newark, New Jersey, number 32, Tate George.
UConn's plan to press didn't take long to have the effect that Calhoun was hoping for, as the Huskies jumped out to an early 4-0 lead. Tim Brando and Dick Vitale had the call for ESPN.
Here comes the full-court pressure against Gary Williams' team, which really doesn't have good backcourt play.
And they forced the turnover. Burrell looks down for Smith, and he draws the foul from Tion McCoy.
Tion McCoy sat out last year, concentrated on his academics, and he's a key player now for Gary Williams' team in terms of point guard play.
McCoy will be checking Smith, and Smith, by the way, a 2-time Big East Rookie of the Week player last year. He can catch fire.
Connecticut Player of the Year. That's been a trademark of Jimmy Calhoun 3 years in a row. He's kept the Player of the Year in the state. Murray Williams, he's kept Mr. Smith, and also Scott Burrell, who I can't wait to see.
Off the back iron, hauled down by Walt Williams. Quickly, McCoy pushes it up.
They got to really count on a play of the M&M guys.
Another turnover, Dick.
That's the problem, backcourt play.
Smith, baseline. Tate George follows.
Tate George, really an underrated player. Gets a lot of heat from a lot of the fans, but the kid is really a hard-working player from out of Newark, New Jersey, played at Union Catholic High School.
After the first 3 minutes, UConn led 8-6, after which they embarked on a 13-0 run. During that run, Tion McCoy picked up his third foul with 15 minutes left in the first half. Here are some highlights from that run.
But Burrell was a first-round draft choice of the Seattle baseball team. They only offered him $175,000 per year, and his mom and dad, who are both in education, said, no way. You are going to go to college, and he was a great football player. In fact, they say he could have been a big-time recruit in football.
Smith counted, and the foul.
I think we're seeing the coming-out party of a star being born here in Chris Smith. There's Gary Williams. He's certainly not cheering for that move by Smith out of Colby Catholic High School. Look at that drive. Takes it up, shows tremendous strength, balance to hang, to convert it. He has a fantastic change in direction dribble. It is so low to the ground. Not really shooting well, shooting under 50% for the year. Here comes some full court pressure. Jimmy Calhoun, an aggressive coach, teaches good discipline.
And another turnover. Boy.
NFL anticipates well defensively. 2-3 zone.
And they moved Williams to the top, and there's yet another turnover.
Well, it's turnover city. They cannot handle his own.
Now Gwynn is in the game, number 15 in blue, but Smith will launch it this time. Gwynn also a fine outside shooter, the junior from Hillcrest, Maryland.
Well, he played at DeMatha High School also, and he scores off that bench, averaging double figures, better than 11 a game.
He may not start the game, but he'll play as many minutes as anybody.
Look at the matchup there with Gwynn.
Oh, a pickpocket act of Cedric Lewis by Gwynn.
Cedric's a shot blocker.
NFL wide open.
NFL, they're going to love him. They're going to love the dub. They're going to love the dub. It scores Connecticut. He's from Israel, 21 years of age, 3 years in the military. Played for the Israel national team.
Knocked away by NFL. Gustav got a hand in there. Walt Williams brings it out.
Williams, a very active athlete, more comfortable playing on a wing than he is in a backcourt. You see why.
Hennefeld started that.
Give it up. Give it up.
DePriest.
Boy, they are running and pressing.
An 11-point run.
Oh, they are run press, baby.
And it is a home court advantage, at least for now, at the Hartford Civic Center. The ACC-Big East Challenge is here.
The Huskies led 21-6 with 12 minutes 30 seconds left in the first half. Maryland regrouped a bit, went on their own 8-0 run, and made it a 10-point game at 36-26 with 5 minutes left in the half. UConn responded quickly.
Assenberg on the wings along with Mustaf. Now rotate back into a 1-2-2 zone.
Smith for three. 45-30 Connecticut.
Maryland looks a little tired defensively.
Smith with 15. And another steal. Sellers starts it.
Oh, look at that change of direction. Are you serious?
Sellers finishes it.
Oh, what a change of direction between his legs. Gary certainly can't be happy with the performance right here. He wants a timeout.
One glance at the clock, and Gary Williams knew he had to stop yet another run.
Hey, Chris Smith made a front change between his legs. Amazing. So low to the ground.
I don't know that I can recall ever hearing a Hartford crowd this supportive of Connecticut basketball.
The Huskies forced 16 turnovers in the first half and cruised into the break with a 49-33 lead. Chris Smith went 6 for 11 from the field with 2 3-pointers for 15 first-half points. There was no let-up for UConn coming out of the locker room.
Leading this one by 16 as we start the second half. Tion McCoy playing with the 3 fouls, shut out offensively, does operate at the point.
I can't possibly see Maryland escaping the cellar of the ACC. Gary Williams would have to do an unbelievable job if they were to get out of that cellar position.
And it opens up as it left off with a turnover, the 17th of the game, and Smith buries the tray.
He's really become a star tonight, Tim. He's thinking shot, very active. There's the pressure.
Off Williams' hands. Gary Williams has his hands up after seeing yet another turnover. 2 times they've touched the ball, 2 times they've turned it over.
The Huskies continued their onslaught throughout the second half, never letting the Terps get closer than 16 points. The result was a resounding victory. The final score was UConn 87, Maryland 65. The Huskies forced 27 turnovers and out-rebounded the much taller Terps 45-38. There were 2 other seemingly prophetic moments from the broadcast that I want to share. The first is Dick Vitale sending a warning to the top 2 teams in the Big East.
I'll tell you one thing, the big boys, Georgetown, Syracuse, they better lace them up when they come into the state of Connecticut and play here. They better lace them up and come to play.
And second, Tim and Dick discuss a new experimental rule change in place for the Big East this season. Instead of each player fouling out after acquiring 5 personal fouls, the limit would be raised to 6 for all conference games.
The Big East this year, along with the Southeastern Conference, has adopted the 6 foul rule. Now, we've touched on that subject before. You were a person, I think, that talked a great deal about having 6 fouls across the board. But I really believe by these 2 leagues making this move, it will only hurt their respective teams in NCAA play.
Well, I definitely feel that way. I don't like it at all unless it's going to be used in uniformity throughout the nation. Used just within the 2 conferences. I think when you have to make that adjustment at postseason time, I believe it's really a whole different look for your use of your bench in terms of strategy, timeouts. I just don't like it. I wouldn't like it at all.
For the first time in his college career, Chris Smith broke the 20-point mark, finishing with 22. The fantastic freshman tandem of Scott Burrell and Nadav Hennefeld each scored 11 points, and John Gwynn and Rod Sellers both added 10 apiece. Tate George entered the game needing 6 assists to tie Carl Hobbs' all-time UConn record of 534, but came up 1 short. Coach Calhoun credited the Huskies' defensive pressure as the key to the resounding victory. Quote, "If they stood there and pounded it in, it would have given us problems. I thought if we didn't press, we'd be in trouble. We were able to negate Maryland's size with perimeter defense. It became impossible for them to pass inside when they were being harassed by Chris Smith." End quote. The Hartford Courant's late great sports columnist Alan Greenberg had this to say about the Huskies in the following day's paper. "If you have watched University of Connecticut basketball closely in recent years and have grown accustomed to certain things, it is hard not to be a little stunned at the abrupt change Jim Calhoun's 1989-90 team represents. If Monday night's mauling of Maryland is even the slightest indication, Huskies fans may be in for a nice season of surprises." Greenberg wasn't the only decorated sports writer who was intrigued by UConn. Sports Illustrated's Curry Kirkpatrick wrote the following in his SI column, recapping the ACC-Big East Challenge. Similarly, Maryland's Williams is not used to his team being out-hustled, but that's what Connecticut did, smothering the Terps' woeful guards under hordes of pressing defenders. Guard Chris Smith is the Husky star, but the name to remember may be 6'7" forward Nadav Hennefeld of Ramat HaSharon, Israel, who earlier this season traveled from Storrs, Connecticut to Tel Aviv to Anchorage, so he could play for both the Israeli national team and UConn in the Great Alaska Shootout. In 24 minutes against Maryland, Hennefeld had 11 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 steals. With the ACC-Big East Challenge behind them, UConn had traversed the toughest part of their non-conference schedule with a record of 5-1. Assuming they don't trip up against the remaining non-Big East teams on the schedule, they would only need 6 or 7 Big East wins to put them in contention for a coveted NCAA tournament bid. But that was a thought for another day. Next on the schedule for the Huskies was another game at the Civic Center, this time a home game against the University of Hartford on Thursday, December 7th. The Hawks have given the Huskies fits in the 3 years since Calhoun took over, even beating UConn the first time they squared off in the 1986-87 season. This year, they were led by the confident forward Lamont Middleton, who was not intimidated by the Huskies. Said Middleton prior to the game, "They don't have anything on us. It's going to be a dogfight. I'm going out there and just play hard. It will go down to the wire." The game started off sloppy, with Hartford turning the ball over on 4 of its first 6 possessions. With the score tied at 8 halfway through the first half, the Huskies turned on the pressure and embarked on a 13-1 run to go up 21-9 with just over 7 minutes left in the half. Middleton, who entered the game averaging 20 points per game, was held to just 4 in the first half. UConn denied him the ball and double-teamed him whenever possible. Said Calhoun, "We tried to double Middleton every time. The combination of bigger people and Lyman DePriest putting on a clinic every time on post-up defense limited his shots." The Hawks cut the Huskies' lead to 28-21 with 2:24 left in the first half, but UConn scored the last 7 points of the half to take a 35-21 lead into the locker room. Hartford turned the ball over 17 times in the first half, but UConn didn't exactly play efficiently either, adding 12 turnovers of their own. "With all those loose balls, it looked like we're playing rugby," said Calhoun after the game. When the second half began, Nadav Hennefeld scored 2 quick baskets, pushing the lead to 39-21. Hartford eventually cut the deficit to 40-27, but that was as close as they would get the rest of the game. UConn eventually went up by 30 and won the game 79-54. As has been the case the past few games, defense led the way for the Huskies. They scored 30 points on 28 Hartford turnovers. Calhoun was still a bit concerned. Quote, "I don't think we played a good offensive game since the first half of the Florida State game. We're creating all of our offense on defense. The problem with that is that we can't do it every night. There's going to be a team that handles the ball better against our pressure." End quote. After the game, Tate George commented on Middleton's pregame statement. Said Tate, "I think his comments fired the team up. I think all of their mouthing off took away from what they wanted to accomplish." Rod Sellers concurred. "We wanted to show them they had never played on a level this high. We showed them how we play with intensity, and they went home the losers." George entered the game needing 1 assist to tie Carl Hobbs' UConn career record. He tied the mark early in the first half and broke it with an assist on a John Gwynn three-pointer a few minutes later. Tate was proud of his accomplishment, saying, "I'm not flashy, but I'll go down as UConn's top assist man ever and one of UConn's best guards." Said Calhoun, quote, "I'm really glad he got it. Honestly, if he can put up with me for 3.5 years, he's a great kid. I've never met a kid I enjoy yelling at more than him, but he can take it. He's playing for a coach who demands excellence on every play, especially him, since he's a quarterback." End quote. George finished the game with 12 points and 6 assists, while Chris Smith added 16, Rod Sellers had 14 points and 6 rebounds, and John Gwynn had 11 points off the bench. Lyman DePriest had 5 steals, and George, Hennefeld, and Smith each had 4. The team recorded 24, which not only set a school record for most steals in a game, but remains a school record 32 years later. After a day off, UConn returned to action on Saturday, December 9th, as they hosted the University of Maine at the Fieldhouse. Another game, another UConn defensive clinic. The Huskies picked up right where they left off in the Hartford game, taking control of the game in the first half and never relenting until the final horn sounded. UConn led early, 14-9, with 16-12 left in the first half. Over the next 8 minutes and 48 seconds, the Black Bears didn't manage one field goal, while the Huskies increased their lead to 27-13. Maine turned the ball over 11 times in the first 14 minutes of the game, which included 9 steals by UConn. The Huskies outscored Maine 21-9 over the final 9 minutes of the first half to take a 44-22 halftime lead, their largest of the season. There was no letdown by UConn and no extended runs by Maine in the second half. Calhoun used all 13 players in the game, and all but Tim Peichel managed to score. The final score was UConn 95, Maine 55. Rod Sellers led the Huskies with a career-high 22 points, with 14 coming in the first half. Chris Smith had 14 points and 7 assists, and Nadav Hennefeld chipped in with the first double-double of the season for the Huskies, with 12 points, 11 rebounds, and 4 steals. UConn out-rebounded Maine 51-32, had a season-high 27 assists, and a season-low 11 turnovers. Calhoun instructed the team to push the ball offensively, saying, quote, "If you don't fast break, you're coming out of the game," end quote. Chris Smith took those words to heart. Smith after the game said, "Coach wanted me to penetrate. He was teasing me all day in practice, saying the only reason I get to the foul line is to shoot technicals. I found myself getting a lot of easy shots as I penetrated." UConn now sported a 7-1 record, and the win over Maine marked the longest winning streak in Jim Calhoun's 4 seasons as head coach. Murray Williams suited up for the game, but did not play. He has been cleared to practice, but isn't expected to play again until the end of December. Coach Calhoun was happy with the progress the team has made over the past 3 weeks. Said Calhoun, quote, "Obviously, we wanted to be 8-0, but we thought that 7-1 would be great, and we're happy. We haven't stubbed our toe yet, and now we're in our first Big East game on Tuesday. I have to be happy with the fact that we've worked hard," end quote. The Huskies were focused on the Villanova game in 3 days. Said Tate George after the game, "The first thing I said when we came in the locker room was it's time to get ready for Tuesday. If we can win that, we'll really be on a roll." Coach Calhoun's fears about UConn's offense sputtering would soon become a harsh reality. The Huskies' smothering full-court pressure defense has been dubbed the Steel Curtain, S-T-E-A-L, by the Hartford Courant's Ken Davis, an homage to the Pittsburgh Steelers' dominating defense from the 1970s, which was known as the Steel Curtain, S-T-E-E-L. UConn currently has 114 steals in 8 games, a 14.3 steal per game average. That is a record-setting pace if that continues for the season. The catalyst for the Huskies' defensive prosperity has been their freshman, Nadav Hennefeld. Nadav is averaging 4 steals per game, which leads the Big East and is well ahead of the second-place Eric Murdoch of Providence. Calhoun summed up Hennefeld's impact, quote, I hate to credit one guy, but it's obvious to all of us, no matter what you put down for steals, that he touches everything. It seems to me that he touches the ball 50 times a game." End quote. The Villanova game would be held at the Hartford Civic Center on Tuesday, December 12th. As with the Maryland game the previous week, this game would be televised on ESPN. UConn has not fared well against Villanova under Calhoun. They're 1-5, with the lone win coming the previous season, also at the Civic Center, on Murray Williams' coast-to-coast layup with 6 seconds remaining. Former Norwich Bulletin UConn beat reporter Pete Abraham recalls how Villanova was a thorn in UConn's side for a while.
Villanova was always a team that stuck in their craw because Villanova would come to Connecticut and get players. And when they got Chris Smith, that was like a big thing, like was to keep him away from Villanova. And so UConn always sort of like they were sort of not embarrassed, but like Villanova was a team like they weren't going to go get the same guy Syracuse was going to get. But they always felt like, well, why can't we get the same guy Villanova's getting? Like, they don't have some fancy facility. They play off campus like we do. And so, yeah, I remember like they were always super annoyed when they lost to Villanova at the time because they felt like, that's one team we should be able to figure out. And they never could. Oh, it took a while anyway before they did.
In addition to being the first Big East game of the season for both schools, this would be the first official game with the experimental 6-foul rule. The rule has been dubbed the Tom Grice rule after Villanova's 7-foot 3-inch senior center. The physical play of the conference over the previous seasons led to the passing of the rule, which theoretically will help bigger players who are prone to foul trouble, such as Georgetown's Alonzo Mourning and Dikembe Mutombo, as well as Grice. UConn went with the same starting 5 as the previous 8 games of George, Smith, Burrell, Sellers, and Cerulik. Things were going fine for the Huskies for the first 5.5 minutes. They trailed 10-8 with 14.5 minutes left in the first half. After a Villanova shot clock violation, UConn had the ball with the crowd stirring, but Dan Cerulik was called for offensive interference to negate a Chris Smith bucket. Things went downhill quickly after that. Nova's Greg Woodard promptly hit a three-pointer to trigger an 11-0 Villanova run. The Wildcats slowed the tempo of the game, milking the shot clock, while the Huskies' cold night shooting prevented them from setting up the full-court press.
Rolly Massimino could not have designed a better game plan and a score early in this game for his basketball team in trying to set tempo.
He has effectively turned it into a half-court game these first 9 minutes.
Here's the matchup zone.
Smith. Cerulik again being blocked out, and he may have picked up a foul. Yeah, Taylor again in position along with Dowdell. And they clearly are simply boxing out the Huskies.
Connecticut's going to really have to have some trifectors by Smith and Burrell if they're going to get back in the basketball game here at halftime.
As the Huskies struggled to score points, the Civic Center crowd turned restless.
It's an 0 for 10 from the floor for Connecticut in the last 5 minutes. They are ice cold. Grice turned it over.
Grice attracts a lot of attention when the ball goes into him. He has to be alert immediately for the open man.
Oh for 10, Connecticut, and you see 0 for 7 from three-point range.
Villanova rotates out of the matchup and now gives him a look at man-to-man.
Burrell had it knocked away by Woodard, so Connecticut holds on.
You could really never get into a rhythm against Rolly Massimino's team. He's constantly changing defenses, and they're usually very effective defenses. See, now he's back into the zone.
George with the bounce pass, and it's stolen again.
A deflected pass.
Woodard is free. Knocked away by Burrell.
What an athletic move by Scotty Burrell. Now, see, they're going to make something happen with this. Get the crowd into it.
A transition hoop is what they need, and they still can't find it. Grice with the outlet to Walker. Chris Walker connects.
Villanova in transition. Walker demonstrates his ability to score.
23-9, the largest lead of the game. Connecticut now 0 for their last 12 from the floor.
And they're out of sync right now on the offensive end. Very lethargic, waiting for somebody to pick them up.
With just under 5 minutes left in the half, with UConn trailing 27-13, Steve Peichel checked in.
It may be shock treatment time for Connecticut. Steve Peichel, who's the co-captain along with Tate George, comes into the game, and Chris Smith sits down.
Peichel, very popular player, has good range as a shooter.
and he's a hustler. I think Jim Calhoun wants more intensity. Woodard's shot won't fall, and Burrell, boy, he's been the one Husky that has been right on cue tonight.
He's really hustled. He's been scrappy. Now he can shoot the ball.
For three. With a chance to spot up, he has 9 of UConn's 16, and they are now 7 for 25 from the floor. A paltry 27%.
They want to try to get Uncle Mo on their side going into the locker room.
Burrell's three-pointer, giving him 9 points for the half, would be the last points the Huskies would score in the first half. After a dismal showing, UConn headed to the locker room down 31-16, as boos rained down from the Civic Center crowd.
You see the time remaining. John Saunders standing by to bring us up to date at halftime. That one's lost out of bounds and will be controlled to Connecticut.
Massimino just did a war dance on the sideline. Very upset that they didn't get the last shot.
John will obviously have the latest on the Jim Valvano situation, along with all the other news of what's been going on in college basketball throughout the week and this evening. At halftime. There you see it, top 25 scorers, and a feature on Scott Burrell, the do-everything athlete playing here in Hartford.
See how quick Villanova reacts to Smith?
Smith can't get the roll. Lost out of bounds, and that's it. We're at halftime. And listen to this. Whether you're down by 15 and have a good team or not, that's not needed. These are college kids, not the Boston Celtics. And the Hartford fans need to learn that, John.
The ugly numbers don't accurately describe how poorly UConn played in the first half. They shot 7 of 34 from the field, a 20.6% clip, and missed 17 of their first 21 shots. They were also 1 of 8 from the free throw line. The Huskies were out-rebounded only 23-19, but Nova limited UConn's second chance opportunities, grabbing 21 defensive boards. The shots UConn were missing weren't difficult shots. They were 1 of 10 from beyond the arc, but they missed countless putbacks and layups. It was not pretty. The second half began as the first half ended, with Greg Woodard knocking down an 18-foot jump shot to push the Wildcats' lead to 33-16. But then the Huskies went on a run of their own.
Another near turnover. Smith beats Cerulean.
Hey, the ball fell down finally. Early in the first half, that hit the back of the rim.
33-18. Connecticut getting back defensively.
Their press doesn't look quick at all like it did against Maryland.
Well, their confidence has been shaken. Villanova has rattled them in this game. At no time did Maryland make a serious push at Connecticut in the ACC-Big East Challenge. And the turnover, Bryce last touched it, and Cerulean will enter it for Connecticut.
I couldn't help to agree with you, Tim, more about the crowd and the environment booing. I think that's a no-no. And I say shame on you, you Connecticut fans, coming out here booing these college kids.
Tate George driving the baseline, using the glass.
That'll give a little spark right now. Now they got to jump into their pressure. Look at Calhoun stalking that sideline, trying to get them fired up.
Hey, Calhoun looked like that when he had a 30-point lead against Maryland. He's always got great intensity.
Well, he was really excited about the way the team was playing, winning 7 in a row, really showing some excellent spark, and he thought tonight they were ready to put on a really solid performance.
No matter how long you coach this game, it's so difficult to read, isn't it?
That's why I like being next to you. Here's the spark. They need a jam right here.
Burrell!
Uh-oh. A little run right now. A little run. And now the crowd. Look at the fickle crowd. Now they're back cheering.
He has 11 of their 22. Scott Burrell. Boy, all over them defensively. He forced the turnover. He forced that turnover flat on his back. And Rolly Massimino, for the first time, upset.
He has to be really concerned. Maybe now the Rolades are coming out, John Saunders. Is the turnover being forced by none other than number 24, Mr. Scotty Burrell.
And he did it while on the hardwood.
If you were to chart Hennefeld for deflections, he'd be one of the real top guys on his team. And a lot of coaches now chart teams for deflections to show that they're playing aggressive basketball. Third personal not big right now because 6 is allowed in the Big East.
Nadal forces the turnover, much as he did last week. The outlet to Smith. Counted and a foul.
They are back. get a TO, baby, if I were Bass. Oh, there it is. Get the TO, Rolly. Here it is. Deflection. Up we go. And the Huskies are back. It's rocking and rolling. It's shaking and baking. They are dancing in the aisles.
Here's the run that you were anticipating, Dick.
Well, we're going to take a look right now. George with a strong drive to the basket, showing some leadership. But then here's the big play. Look at Hennefeld. He deflects so many plays, gets it in play, and now Scotty Burrell is going to finish it. I love him. What an athlete. We talk about an athlete. We're talking a jumper, a quick player. And he possesses that. 8-2, baby, in the second half. And it's created a little bit of a stir on the Villanova sideline.
4 turnovers for the Wildcats. They've only attempted 2 shots in the first 3.5 minutes. Connecticut 6 shots and only 1 turnover, so things are turning around for Jim Calhoun.
You got to credit Calhoun, too. He's not going to let his team quit. He's such a fighter, and that really pours onto the floor.
An 8-point lead. They've cut this lead in half since the intermission.
There's a trap along the base. Good anticipation.
George with the steal.
That's what they live off. Turnovers. They're back, Timmy. Big-time style. They're anticipating well. They're playing the passing lanes well. They were a step behind in that first half.
Well, the steel curtain has draped Villanova in the second half.
Villanova took that steel curtain and made it like the Berlin Wall in the first half. They took it apart.
They really did.
Right now.
Miller in the paint. Too soft off the front iron, and Nadav Hennefeld with a rebound. Smith. Oh, to Burrell!
Scotty Burrell, is he coming alive? Is he showing the Big East that he can play Big East basketball? Scotty's a Skywalker. Connecticut was non-existent in that first half.
That's what makes this game so special. Burrell driving the baseline. Great feed to Sellers.
Did you see that pass? Will somebody tell Scott Burrell this is the first Big East game he's playing in his career?
All told, it was a 14-2 run that brought UConn to within 4, 35-31, with 12:50 left in the game. Villanova responded with an 11-2 run of their own to push their lead to 46-33 with under 10 minutes to play. A Scott Burrell three-pointer would cut the lead to 5 with 3 minutes left, but once again the Wildcats responded and led 60-51 with 33 seconds left. A Dan Cerulik three-pointer cut the lead to 6, and UConn promptly fouled Villanova's Rodney Taylor, sending him to the line for a 1-and-1 with 22.3 seconds left on the clock.
Burrell, by the way, fouling out with 6, and he now will become the answer to a trivia question. The first Big East player to foul out with 6 personal fouls. But a good night for Scott. He carried Connecticut, 18 points and 8 rebounds.
I'd give him an A+ for his effort here tonight. Burrell came out, fired up, played very hard.
Taylor at the line.
We just praise him for the way they've been shooting free throws, and he bricks that one.
They need 2 quick threes. They wanted a foul, did not get it. Hennefeld can shoot from deep, and he spots up. There it is. Oh, Nadav knocks it down, and the youngster from the Israeli national team has come to Yankee country and given his team a break.
Calhoun says, where have you been, Nadav, tonight?
His first points of the game, and it comes with 9.2 seconds remaining. A 3-point game. Watch Cerulik find him, Dick.
Cerulik with the pass out to the Dove. He knows where the line is. Squares his body, and the Dove tickles the twine. And there's still a little faint hope here.
Hennefeld's 3 made it a one-possession game with 9.2 seconds left, but Villanova made 4 free throws to ice the game, handing UConn a loss in their first Big East game of the season, 64-57. Scott Burrell led the way for the Huskies with 18 points and 8 rebounds, while Dan Cerulik had 13 and 7. Chris Smith had 12 points, but was 5 of 16 from the field, including 0 for 6 from three-point range. Tate George, 6 points, Nadav Hennefeld, 3, and John Gwynn, 2 points on 1 of 8 shooting, struggled mightily. Coach Calhoun took the loss in stride. Quote, "We as a team on the perimeter did not play well, but I don't think we should be discouraged on December 12th. 6 weeks ago, I told you about a young team which will have its ups and downs. This was a down." End quote. UConn radio play-by-play announcer Bob Usler recalls the crowd at his first Big East game on the mic at the Civic Center.
I remember 2 things. I remember the energy in the building. Now, I had been to UConn games enough to understand, what the energy was all about. But to feel it as a broadcaster for the first time and kind of take that in and help fuel the broadcast, it was special and it was different. And I had done some games in the Hartford Civic Center, UConn games. There was a preseason game. And then the ACC Big East Challenge was so my point is that, this wasn't my first Hartford Civic Center game, but it was my first Big East Hartford Civic Center game. And it was something. And then, they get booed. I'm like, whoa, wow. So, two things. One, a crowd that was really into the game and energized, and a crowd that is ready to turn on you in a second. I'm like, whoa, this is a tough audience here. Again, none of this is newsflash stuff, but again, from a broadcasting standpoint, you're taking this in, it's fueling your broadcast, your emotions, and how you're reacting. And it was different. It was different.
The Huskies would have some time to lick their wounds and regroup. Their next game was 11 days away thanks to a break for final exams. Their next opponent was also a break from Villanova, as UConn hosted Division II Southern Connecticut State University at the Fieldhouse on Saturday, December 23rd. The Owls were led by future UConn Avery Point men's basketball head coach Rich Radiccioni, who would eventually be SCSU's all-time leading scorer when he graduated. There was zero drama to this one. UConn won 100-37, their largest margin of victory since the 1919-20 season, when they defeated the Wentworth Institute 71-6. SCSU's 37 points were the fewest allowed by a UConn team since they defeated URI in the legendary slowdown game in the 1969 season, 35-32. UConn set a mark for the most three-pointers made with 11, and Calhoun said after the game that he set a record for the longest time he spent sitting down in a game. Chris Smith led the Huskies with 20 points, John Gwynn had a career-high 16, Tate George had 12 points and 9 assists, and Nadav Hennefeld flirted with a quadruple-double, notching 9 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, and 6 steals in just 23 minutes. Murray Williams made his return from the knee injury he suffered way back in the Auburn game in November, playing 16 minutes and scoring 7 points. Freshman Terreno Walker had his most productive game as a Husky, grabbing 10 rebounds. Lyman DePriest was not in uniform, as Calhoun allowed him to fly home to Detroit early for Christmas break. Said Calhoun after the game, "I'm going to call him right now and tell him that if he had been here, it might have been a closer game." UConn would be back in action in less than a week for the Connecticut Mutual Classic. The Classic was an annual 4-team holiday tournament hosted by UConn, which began in 1978. The winners of the 2 games on Friday meet in the championship game on Saturday, with the Friday losers playing in the consolation game. The Huskies had won the event the previous 2 seasons. UConn's opponent on Friday was St. Joseph's, who entered the game with a 1-5 record, while the other game featured Delaware versus Mississippi State. Coach Calhoun was hoping to use the 2 CMC games as an opportunity to improve the Huskies' struggling half-court offense. Part of his plan was to start Nadav Hennefeld in place of Dan Cerulik. Said Calhoun, quote, "We know we've got to get the ball moving and get our offense going. I can't tell if it has improved, but Nadav will touch the ball more. He gets the ball moving, and that became evident in the second half against Southern. If that happens, I think our offense will be better." End quote. Once again, UConn's defense dominated a weaker opponent as the Huskies cruised to an 83-58 win. UConn forced 21 turnovers, including 14 steals, 5 by Hennefeld, and held the Hawks to 30.2% shooting for the game. The Huskies blew the game open in the final 10 minutes of the first half, stretching an 18-16 lead to 43-24 heading into halftime. The flow of the game created problems for Calhoun's plan to focus on the half-court offense. Said Calhoun, "Our defense and quickness got us there again. It gets us to a point where we're about 25 points up. The fans want me to sub. I want to run the half-court offense. So we slow up the game and we look lousy for the last 10 minutes. It's a pattern that's starting to develop. The crowd wants Mark Sir in the game, and I want to run a half-court offense. They're not happy, and I'm not happy." Chris Smith paced UConn with 19 points, while Tate George had his best all-around game of the season, with 14 points, 6 assists, and only 2 turnovers. Calhoun praised the senior guard, saying, "Tate played really, really terrific tonight. Put it in headlines because he won't believe I said it. He really directed the team. He ignited us." Tate's response? "I don't want to hear that. Tomorrow he'll tell me I'm spending too much time reading my press clippings." The Huskies' opponent the following night would be 7-1 Mississippi State, who defeated Delaware on a free throw by Todd Merritt with 1/10 of a second left, 66-65. For the second consecutive game, Hennefeld was in the starting lineup in place of Dan Cerulik, as Calhoun continued to focus on improving on the offensive side of the ball. Calhoun's wish finally came true. UConn's ball movement was greatly improved as the Huskies shot a season-high 54.7% in an 84-68 victory. The Huskies led 46-29 at halftime and had stretched the lead to 56-36 with 14 minutes left in the game. The Bulldogs quickly cut the deficit to 11 with just under 12 minutes remaining when Hennefeld hit 2 straight buckets, and with 9 minutes left, UConn led by 19, effectively ending the game. Hennefeld, who was named MVP of the tournament, finished with 17 points, 6 rebounds, 6 steals, and 3 assists. Chris Smith, 14 points, and Tate George, 13 points and 8 assists, were also named to the all-tournament team. Said Calhoun, quote, "We played our best basketball of the year. We came out and played about 12 minutes of defense that I'd like to put into a bottle and keep with us for the rest of the season. Then we just got a tremendous team performance. I told the kids that I was very proud of the way we played." End quote. Murray Williams continued to see his minutes increase, which gives Calhoun flexibility to pair him with Burrell and Hennefeld in the front court to help increase offensive efficiency. Said Calhoun, "It's like having 5 guards on the floor. It's really nice to see." The players were feeling confident following the win. Said John Gwynn, "If we keep doing that, we're going to win a whole lot of basketball games this year. A whole lot." Chris Smith, quote, "We worked on making the extra pass in practice, and it was good. We got layups and easy shots. We've been blowing teams out, and they have forced us to take quick shots. They gave them to us. Tonight, we had to make the extra pass, and that's what we did. I think we're ready for the Big East. I know we're capable of playing anybody in the country now." End quote. At 10-2, UConn ended December on a high note. The calendar and the UConn program were about to turn the page to a new year, a new decade, and new heights. But the journey would be far from smooth. Coming up on the next episode of the Dream Season podcast, UConn travels to St. John's for their first Big East road game of the season. The Dream Season podcast is researched, written, and produced by me, Matt Edwards. Written sources for this episode are the Hartford Current Archives and SI Vault. You can connect with the show via Twitter and Instagram at Dream Season Pod. If you have any memories to share about anything I just mentioned, want to correct me on something I screwed up, or just have general feedback to give, send me an email at dreamseasonpod@gmail.com or call and leave me a message at 903-884-8990. After I'm done with the regular episodes of the show, I'd love to have an episode that consists entirely of your memories of the Dream Season. Either leave a message at the above number or email me with an audio recording of your recollections, along with your name and location, and I will include them in that episode. Thank you, Mike, for submitting the first one. I really appreciate all of the positive feedback I've received so far. As always, thank you so much for listening.